It's 20 minutes before 8 on KNBR 68, 7:40 in the morning. It's mostly fair weather today. Got some low clouds along the coast, night and morning. That's about it. High today and tomorrow, mid-50s to low 60. KNBR 68, Good Times giveaway.
Frank Dill arrived in San Francisco from Buffalo in 1963. He started at KNBR as the afternoon DJ and sports announcer. He teamed up with Mike Cleary and held down the morning slot for 32 years. Frank was inducted into the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame in the first class. That was the class of 2006. And I'm so happy to be here with you today, Frank. And it's been so long since we've seen each other. We worked together at KNBR probably sometime in the 1970s. I'm still trying to remember, and I know that you probably have a hard time remembering those days too, but we have our calendar pictures to remind us.
Yeah, well, I have trouble remembering those days, but I have no trouble with remembering you.
Well, thank you so much. It was fun. KNBR was great, but you started out when in this business? Because it had to be, oh God, 60, 70 years ago?
Oh my. My first introduction to this business was listening to the radio in Arlington, Virginia, to a guy on the morning show who asked a question, a sports question. Mm-hmm. And I knew the answer, so I ran to the phone and called his station and gave the answer. And he came back on after playing a song or something and said, well, we have our winner, Frank Dill from Washington Lee High School. And I heard my name on the radio. Anyway, that led to my rushing to the phone every morning I could to try to answer his sports question. And several times I got through, so he got to know my name. He called the house one day and said to my mother, we're thinking about a television show. This is 1948.
Wow.
Television was brand new.
I know, yeah.
Anyway, to make a long story short, he started a television show called the Tele-Whiz Kids. I was one of the 3 kids on this TV show answering sports things. And from that, I started playing softball with the engineers and the other guys who were at the television station. I played softball on the Washington Monument grounds with them on Saturday mornings and got to know all these guys in the business. I was no longer in high school, so they hired me as an office boy. And from that, I became an operator in the studio. You know, I would set up the props and all. From one thing led to another, and I've been in broadcasting one form or another ever since.
And how did you get to San Francisco? When did you get here?
When I came to San Francisco in 1963, I got the job because the manager of KNBR was the left fielder on my softball team on the Washington Monument grounds. And he had seen me and heard me in Buffalo. And he offered me the job here in San Francisco. So that's how I got here.
And you started out as like doing sports and that kind of thing on KNBR. How did it end up that you were on a show with Mike Cleary? Well,
eventually I became the morning man at KNBR rather than the afternoon guy. And we had a guy who followed me on the air that I didn't think was very good. In other words, he came on when I went off it. He was on at 10.
Yes.
I suggested to the manager that there's this other guy that they had hired who was on later in the day would be better at 10 a.m., Mike Cleary. I thought he sounded good. So they put him in at 10 a.m., and then Mike started coming in during the last hour of my show. And occasionally we would exchange comments and so on and so forth. That evolved into someone suggesting we'd make a good team. I kind of held back from that idea. I said I'd give it a try, but I didn't want to lose my spot on the air, if you know what I mean.
Of course.
Just
Yeah.
business-wise.
Yeah.
So I said I'd give it a try. We could try it for 6 months, and if I didn't like it, then we'd back off. Well, I loved it. So we remained partners, Frank and Mike, in the morning for a lot of years.
How did that partnership change your career, if at all?
Changed my career tremendously because now I was half of a team rather than the guy in the morning, right? Yeah. And it changed my personality on the air quite a bit. But as long as Mike was with me and playing different characters and making me laugh, it all worked. And as long as it was working, we were both happy.
So why do you think the show was so popular? Because I remember it really well, and I remember I was a minor character, as I said, on one of, I don't know which one it was, but it was fun to do. It was a fun time, and we would come into the studio and just be there with you guys, and it was just fun. Was that the motivating factor, just having fun? Other than being a good broadcaster.
We had fun. Mike and I had fun. Mm-hmm. It took a while because when we became a team, he would sit at one mic and I'm at another. But if he did a character, if he wanted to do a character voice, mm-hmm. at first he couldn't do it in front of me. So he had to go down the hall and call in on the phone.
Is that why we had so many phone calls?
Yeah. But then, of course, gradually he was able to do it in front of me. So we rigged the microphone in the studio so that he could throw a switch so that that microphone sounded like he was on the phone. And then he could do these phone-ins sitting next to me. Mm-hmm. He would occasionally write a little script because he thought up a character, and he'd give me a piece of the script, you know, and he would play this new character, and I would try to follow the script that he had written for me, and frequently we'd get all mixed up with the script. So we started throwing scripts away, and we would just ad-lib these things. But he became the voice of many different characters. He had a newsman, O'Bradley.
Yes, I remember O'Bradley.
And he would tell stories as this O'Bradley. And I would fall over laughing. And a lot of people thought, a lot of listeners told me, they thought it was funny because I would laugh so hard.
It's true,
but it
because
was genuine laughter.
Well, you had the best laugh. You absolutely had the best laugh. You still do. I think I remember one of the other characters is Julia Chives.
Julia Chives.
The cooking, was she a cooking maven?
Yes.
I can't remember.
And he had Connie, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember, Mike. I'm sorry, Mike, I'm losing my place here. Connie Sewer.
Oh, yes, Connie Sewer.
She
I remember
was
Connie
the wine
Sewer.
expert.
Yes.
Connie Sewer, yeah.
Absolutely. But see, those are the kinds of things that we love to hear. And okay, on any given day when you were in the studio, was there a time when you said, oh, let's just do Julia Chives today or Connie Sewer, or did it just come organically? Mostly
it came from Mike thinking that it's appropriate to do that character today or something. Mm-hmm. And so he would just start into it. I wouldn't even know what we were going to do. Most of it was just completely ad-lib back and forth. Mm-hmm. There were times when he would play a character because someone like that was in the news that day. Mm-hmm. For instance, he used to do a great Richard Nixon impersonation. Well, if Richard Nixon was in the news that day, it was a logical time to do it.
Sure.
And he would, as if he's calling me as Richard, or maybe I pretended to call Richard Nixon, who responded by saying, hello, Frank, as if he knew me, you know. So it depended a lot on what was in the news that day, what kind of characters he would use.
In between the characters and all of that, was there, you played music or I know there was news because you had a great news department at that time.
Right.
What would happen in between the bits?
Well, when we first started as a team, yeah, we were kind of like disc jockeys in a sense that I'm sure during a half hour we might play a couple of songs, but that's about it. But as the team developed, we just did away with the music. Between the two of us, talking to each other and playing commercials, filled the time, so we didn't play any more music. In fact, I remember the manager saying to me one day after the show, he said, did you play such and such a song today? I said, man, we haven't played a song in weeks. He wasn't even really aware of it. We just had it merged into where just the two of us talked and played commercials.
Oh yes, and I remember, and you played lots of commercials because
Yeah.
your show was very popular and it was always sold out, so we always knew that. We were talking earlier about Mike's character as your mother for Thanksgiving. Tell us that story.
Well, I don't know why it started, but it was in fact Thanksgiving Day, and so it was a slow day on radio, you know. But during the last hour of the show, from 9 to 10, Mike called and pretended to be my mother, and she was saying, "Thank you for inviting me, you know, for Thanksgiving dinner." I said, "It's okay, Mom, but I'm busy now. I'm on the radio. I'll see you later." And she said, "But I'm out here. I don't know how to find your house, you know." And all. So I'm playing the curmudgeon, and I'm saying, "Mom, don't bother me now. Where are you?" She says, "I just walked across the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's starting to rain." And I'm saying, "Look, Mom, I haven't got time to deal with this now. See if you can't find a ride." And this went on and all, back and forth for an hour. I come off as the total bad son, you know. But it was funny. I have heard it played back, and it's funny.
It's funny, and it's also kind of interesting because he sounded really like a lady.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe at some point, and I was there, I thought maybe that was your mother, you know, because he was that good in that character. And I don't know how he came up with that, and I'll have to ask him at some point.
I don't either. I'll tell you. It was funny because she kept complaining about the raining, and we had calls coming in to the station from truckers saying they wanted to know where she was because they would give her a ride. So they were believing it.
It was believable. I was believing it, and I knew better. I mean, it sounded, when I first heard it, I thought it was authentic. I really did. I really did. So that's how good you guys were. And that was one of the highlights because, you know, holiday time in broadcasting is really kind of,
Slow day.
Slow.
Right.
And especially on Thanksgiving and Christmas. So that was like that was a big deal. That was a big story. Were there any stories or characters that were off limits, or did you guys just go full out with whatever was happening at the time?
I don't think there were any characters that were off limits. Sometimes some of the bits I guess got a little racy.
Yes, they did.
We had a character who lived in the Widow Fleesnicker. What was the name of that town? I can't remember.
Oh no, I don't remember either. But I'm telling you, I don't remember.
And he talked about the Widow Fleesnicker and give me reports from this little town, and I can't remember it. But sometimes they got a little risque. But I thought they were funny, so everything was fine.
And I know that a lot of I mentioned that I was a minor character, but I know that you at some point had Jane Morrison, who was our public affairs director, was a character. Gene DiCardo, the
Newsman.
news guy, was a character, and it's like you pulled everybody in and really made them a part of the show.
Yeah, if somebody was a character in our eyes, we turned them into a character that Mike Cleary would do with me on the air. Yeah.
That was really fun, because everybody was included in that, and we really liked that. And I guess I'm trying to think. Hap Harper. Hap Harper was flying as traffic at that time.
Yes.
And he became a character. So there were a lot of people that were pulled
We
in.
made a character out of Hap Harper because Mike did a funny character who pretended to be a Hap Harper kind of guy. And he would make fun of Hap Harper. Yeah, and just another character.
Now, you retired in, I guess, 1997.
I think so, 97. Yeah.
And after all of the years that you were in broadcasting, what was it like? Because I've done it. What was it like to retire? Because you were, still very popular.
What was it like to retire after all those years?
Yes.
You know, I remember telling John Madden one morning. John was on with me in the mornings at that time. And I said, hey, John, you know what? I'm going to retire. And he said, why? Why? And I said, I've been thinking about it, but the reason I'm going to retire, I'm going to be 67 years old. And there are so many places I'd like to go to and see that I don't have time doing on little vacations. I'd like to have my life revolve around things that I want to do, things my wife wants to do, and that's why I wanted to retire. And of course, I've never thought I'd made a bad decision there.
Right.
Everybody knows when it's time to hang it up, I think.
Yeah, but you still were vital. You were still doing, the shows. And I guess you had to create a new normal. And did you do that traveling, the kinds of things that you talked about?
Yeah, well, I accepted retirement very nicely. There were people like, John Madden's sons who wanted me to come to Pleasanton and do some recording work and so on. I did that once or twice, and then I thought, I don't want to be driving to Pleasanton.
Too much like work.
Yeah, so I said, let's knock that off,
I love that. Now, you've had a chance you're a very good observer, we all know that. You've had a chance to look at the business of broadcasting from the time that you started until our present time.
See how it changed?
2024. Yes. How has it changed in your eyes?
Oh my goodness.
I know it's a long story, but
I can remember when I first came to San Francisco in 1963, that there were only, I think, first of all, there were only a few radio stations. There weren't many FM stations. There were very few radio stations. AM stations. Television, there were only 4 or 5 channels. So how did it change? Now, there must be 100 radio stations in the Bay Area. I don't know how many television stations, plus the fact you've got all of this other material available for television. My goodness, it's a whole different business.
Yeah.
In 1963, it was a very small business. Not that it didn't have a lot of viewers on television and a lot of listeners on radio, but it was totally small compared to now.
Were you, and the parameters that you had to work within, the things that you couldn't say in 1963 and the things you probably could say now, what were the limitations in 1963 or 64 in that area?
Gosh.
Do you recall?
I don't really know that it was that different. I don't feel that it was restricted in 63. There were some people on the radio in 63 that I thought were fabulous, but unfortunately I couldn't hear them because they were my They were like John Sherwood. He was
Oh,
my
yes,
opponent.
sure.
He was great. I wished I could do the things that Don Sherwood was doing on KSFO. I sounded pretty flat on KNBR compared to him. Things were different. I don't know. I've always felt good about competing with the other stations and so on. We didn't always have the biggest ratings, but we did pretty well over the years. And I was always grateful for the listeners, and that's about it. I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
Now, well, you were great. Speaking of that, as a solo performer, I mean, obviously you did very well. But then you got Mike Cleary as a partner. Did that, excuse me, did that make you a better performer or just expanded what
Made me
you
a
did?
different performer. I was, as a solo act, I tried to be snappy, keep things moving. You know, in my ears, I was being a perfectionist in radio. When Mike and I became partners on the air, I totally loosened up. Now it was just all pure fun as far as I was concerned. It was laugh time for me, fun time for me. A few years before I retired, Mike Cleary left the station. I think I did 2 or 3 years solo after Mike left. I had to go back into my old zip mode, and I used other people instead of Mike. I used Mayor Willie Brown. I used other real-life people. Mayor Willie Brown was attending the convention in San Diego. Mayor Willie Brown became the guy I got on the phone because Mike wasn't there to be on the phone. I'd get Mayor Willie Brown on the phone. I'd find other people like that, and I'd get them on the phone. So I had to go back to my old move it, keep it moving. I had to go back to my old style.
But you made it work in a very good way.
It worked.
Yeah,
It worked.
it worked very well, actually. It worked very well. I remember that.
For instance, John Madden became one of the substitutes for Mike Cleary, if you understand what I'm saying.
I do. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Coach was amazing.
Oh,
he was
yeah.
very funny. He was
Coach was
a very
amazing.
funny guy. And I really enjoyed listening to that part of it as well.
Well, John Madden had been on KSFO in the mornings with Gene Nelson. And when Gene Nelson retired, John came and was on my show for years with Mike Cleary, too, you know. But then when I retired, John went to KCBS. And now my friend Stan Bunger is coming out with a book called Madden in the Morning. And it'll include a lot of stories, obviously, where Madden and Stan were on the air together. But it'll include some when was on with, or John was on with Frank, and John was on with Gene Nelson before that. His book's going to be very funny.
I am very excited to read the book as well, and we've talked about that.
Madden in the Morning.
Madden in the Morning, yes. This is a living history interview. And so in terms of history itself, what is it that you would like everybody to know about your history in this business?
About my history? Well, that I was just a lucky guy who stumbled into broadcasting as a teenager. And except for a few years in the Air Force where I was overseas during the Korean War, and even then I was on Armed Forces Radio Service, so I was going to say all those years I've been somehow attached to broadcasting. It all worked out very well. I met a woman in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I was working fresh out of the Air Force. I married her, and 70 years later, we're still married.
Yes.
So you're about to make me cry.
Oh, no, I don't, you will not cry. This is a wonderful,
I'm getting emotional.
I know, it's okay.
To think I'm 93 years old and you're still interested in talking to me.
Well, why wouldn't we be? Why wouldn't we be?
That's enough to make anybody emotional.
Yeah. No, this is living history, and you're a living human being, and you are valuable and viable, and you have all of these things in your head, and now I'm making myself cry. But but I know what you're saying. It's great to be able to communicate,
Yeah.
and to share your story with all of the folks who will be watching this video, and who will, in the years to come, say, God, I remember listening to Frank Dill, and here you are, and thank you.
Well,
Grateful.
it's a pleasure for me to be with you and to have a chance to remember some of the highlights of my broadcasting career. I was lucky. I just had so much luck. And I love the business.
Mm-hmm.
I still love radio, TV. I hope radio never goes away.
Yes, I do too. It's certainly changed a lot as we
It's changed a lot.
It's changed a lot. Frank, you're amazing. I appreciate you, and we're grateful that you're here with us in our Living History series, and looking forward to maybe, who knows, revisiting this in a
Thank
couple
you,
of
Rosie.
years.
And
you.
thank all the people who remember listening to me or seeing me on TV. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And we'll talk soon.